Hi, you've reached Andy with Mountain Computers. Today is February 27th. It's a Wednesday, and I'm going to talk about local area networks and security for a moment. This is primarily for businesses, but it can also apply for your home. Now, there's two things you want to think about when it comes down to a network, a local area network. One, it's wired, or two, it's wireless. The most important thing that I have seen with businesses is that the router, the main router that's on the edge of their business before it goes to the internet, has to be an industrial strength router. Now, there's a couple routers that you can use. I don't have them here. SonicWall is a very strong router, industrial strength. Cisco is another one. Now, these are routers that are both a network appliance and a security appliance at the same time. Sometimes in some of my networks I'll have those layered. I'll have a router on the edge, which is facing the internet, which is purely security. And then I'll have another router inside that deals with internal traffic. So I'll have some sort of layering. So I don't put all my eggs in one basket right there at the edge of the network. Once you get inside the network, where all the computers, PCs, and servers, and printers, and backup, and all that stuff goes, then you have one, a documentation challenge, and two, an application support challenge. Not necessarily a security challenge, except for when it comes down to usernames and passwords, and of course your wireless. So when it comes down to the PCs, that's simple. Do you put on each PC that connects to the router, do you have the internet or the local area address for the PC? Is it static or dynamic? Do you program the device with a static internet address, which is in your local area network, or do you make it dynamic? That's a question when it comes to setup and configuration. Typically, if you have less than, I'd say probably less than 10 computers, go ahead and make them all static. Make them all a hard number, 192, 168, 1 dot something, like 10 through 50 or 100 through 150. Now, if you have more than that, you might want to make it dynamic, and that's to where there is a dynamic host control protocol server, or that service is in your router already. Now, most routers that you get from a major vendor will have dynamic host control protocol turned on automatically. Now, if you're in a business network that has like a domain controller, which controls your usernames, your passwords, some authentication, your applications, that DHCP service may be on that server, and therefore the one on your router will be turned off. You cannot have two dynamic host control protocol services running on the same network, providing the same addressing or similar addressing, because the local devices will get confused when they ask for an address if they're set up for dynamic. So that's a bad thing. So each PC, either static or dynamic, it has one gateway and a subnet. Now, I'm not going to go into subnet addressing and how you talk about it in A, B, C, D class networks. Just understand that most subnets is how your primary address and your gateway, that's your PC or some device like tablet, phone, or whatever, is talking to a router. Even a print server or a copy or something will talk to a router and broadcast information to and from devices internally directly. Okay? That subnet is usually 255, 255, 255, 0. That's a Class C network, which means the first three groups of numbers are set at 255, and the last one means you can have addresses from 1 to 254 in that network. Okay? This is a networking class, network addressing class, but we can go into that in the future. So back to the network. So you have the internet, a router, a security router, a local area router, if not the same. Now, there can be wireless on that router, yes or no. Or you can have a wireless router that's providing services inside on your network separately. So local area network, a bunch of PCs, a couple servers, multifunction copier, printer, fax, scan machine I've seen. How do you control the perimeter within? Okay. Now, one, if you're in a shared leased space, you have walls. Okay. Now, if you have a wall that's shared with a neighbor, how do you know that the network jack that you plug your network cable in is not being tapped by your neighbor? If it's a government agency, what they do is they'll come in and they'll put in a false wall inside that and have their network totally isolated from the normal walls that are in the actual space they lease. So they control, so there's some dead space between that. They control the interior walls that gives power, network, telecom, all the other stuff. So that's sort of like another barrier within the walls. You can also control your local network with what's called media access control, which means on every device there is a MAC address, physical address, that you can program into your router that says this router allows this device to communicate and talk and do stuff on the local area network, and so on and so forth into the internet, depending on your policies. So that is one really strong way to do that. We do that with wireless networks inside some controlled businesses. So what we do is the local area network is either static, and then we MAC control the wireless. The MAC control on the wireless says these wireless devices are authenticated to talk to the wireless router and communicate inside for both applications, like for warehousing applications, and then we go a step further, and not all employers do this. They'll allow a guest wireless network for their employees to connect their cell phones to the wireless guest network, but not the business network at work. Now, not all employers will do that because of security and viruses and what your cell phone might bring into the business network. So if you're an employee and they don't give you network wireless access, there's a reason why, and it's a good reason. Now, like hotels, they'll provide you guest wireless access. Now that's a free-for-all. You can catch things. There are modes, secure modes, unsecure modes, promiscuous modes, channel modes, VPN modes, all sorts of ways that you can protect yourself in a business or while you're traveling. But that local area network that you're working with, it'll just be PCs with an internet address, which is a 192, 190, 172, or a 10.0 network, all these different networks. But they're all private. They don't talk directly to the internet. Now, if your router, which has a public address which the rest of the internet can get to, if those addresses come directly into your devices all the way, like Charter I've seen do, that's a bad thing. That's a real bad thing. You don't want to do that. You don't want to have one of your internal computers with a public address unless it's intentional. And we usually call that a DMZ, where you take an internal server and you fully expose it through the router to the internet. Well, now you're leaving that device on its own to protect itself from the internet. So typically we'll put a security appliance in front of that to give it a little bit more control and filtering. So I hope that makes sense. I really wanted to talk about business networks a lot. So in your business networks, you have PCs, you have laptops, you have phones, you have wired, you have wireless. Your bandwidth, network speed internally should all be gigabit. I mean, there's 10 megabit, 100 megabit, and gigabit. Everybody who does a financial application inside a small business or a large business, it all has to be gigabit. And these voice VoIP phones that you have on your desk that connects to the internet, and your PC connects to that, that's a choke point. And I've told people countless times that in order to get around that, you have to have a little hub, or you have to have an extra jack on the wall for your PC to connect directly to the gigabit router, and your phone to connect to the gigabit router and do stuff on its own without slowing down your PC connecting to your server where your financial data is, or your financial applications like Peachtree, QuickBooks, Sage, SAP, you name it. Whatever your ERP or CRM or whatever you're doing, cloud-based or server-based, you have to be at a gigabit per second. And you can tell on your network connection when you bring up the properties, it'll say, I'm connected at 1.0 gigabits per second. If you're not, there's a problem. 10 years ago, it was expensive to achieve that. But But lately, no, everybody should be gigabit per second, and that's real easy. It's like $100 change out of a certain device in your network. And it doesn't even have to be the router. It can just be a switch that you put in tandem with the router to where the router can't get to that speed. Well, fine, let all your devices internally talk through that switch at gigabit speeds. I don't care, a 16 port, an 8 port, a 24 port gigabit switch. Managed, unmanaged. Just depends. Price point for one of those, $200, $300, $400. But your productivity goes from 100 to 1,000, and that's not really a true factor because there is some, mathematics in there. But business network, local area network. If you have multiple businesses connected through the internet, so you have maybe an office in Sacramento and an office in Reno, or an office in Carson City, or an office further on down in San Diego or Los Angeles, those will be communicating through the internet at a slower speed typically than your local area network. But they may be able to see each other through some various different network protocols, VPN tunnels, MPLS circuits, things like that. I support those kind of networks. I see them all the time. I cut people over from one to the other. It's not hard. It used to be hard. It's a little expensive still. It shouldn't be expensive. But when you have multiple local area networks between offices, you'll learn to manage the connectivity between them and make sure that everybody is running as fast as possible and secure as possible. Antiviruses on your local area network. Every PC doesn't have to have the same antivirus. Some are free, some are paid for. Whatever your corporate policy is, whatever your business policy is, follow it. I annually check to see if we're doing the right thing with various businesses, whether or not the antivirus is the right thing to use. Your applications, Office, your email, cloud-based. We were just going over some different business networks in the past couple days, and we're trying to determine whether or not we split the network, put some things that are shared by everybody up in the cloud, but then the things that are real proprietary to the core of the business, go ahead and keep those local, not only for backups, but for speed, but for security. But your backups, 20 years ago I came up with what's called a hybrid cloud storage network, where you keep certain things in the cloud on servers on the web, and then some things local. I came up with that in 2001, 2002 with some of my business models and proprietary inventions, and now it's become mainstream. It's taken 20 years for the world to catch up with, inventors like me, but that's just, what else? Local area networks. Can't think of anything else. Well, I wanted to cover this, so if you have questions, comments, be sure to like and subscribe and share. I've taken a couple days between topics, but this subject of local area business networks, or even home networks, the same thing applies. Have a piece of 8.5 by 11 with a scratch down and annotate your network and your diagram with all of your critical choke points, and do speed tests on your network. Go to speedtest.net, click the go button, and see what your speeds are. Don't click on the ads around it, but every so often during the day, 2 in the afternoon versus 8 in the morning, I see what the speeds are for your business network or your home network, and see what the speeds are up and down. 100 down, 10 up, 300 down, 5 up, or 5 down, 2 up. Make sure you don't have any rogue networks just happen to be plugged in. There are tools that I'll get into that we can analyze the network, but that'll be another video. So again, this is Andy with Mountain Computers. Like, subscribe, and share. I'm looking for sponsors, and by the way, I love SonicWall now. I didn't used to, but now I do. And I'll talk about SonicWall and some of these things that I'm doing right now to really make them much more efficient than they were originally designed, and how the documentation has been weak to make them more easy to use than what one would expect. Look forward to that one. That's a cool one. I've just done some really cool SonicWall configurations for business-to-business, site-to-site stuff that wasn't in the documentation. It should have been. but highly efficient stuff. So anyhow, that's it for now. Look forward to more videos coming up. More to come. Take care.